Hello and welcome back to the Vinyl Brotherhood, where we like to kick back, take it easy, and just chat about music, whether it be the latest and greatest, new releases, or old favorites from years gone by. Today we'll be looking at a new album by Andy Shauf titled Norm, a really interesting concept album that goes through some very unexpected twists and turns. I can't wait to discuss it with you, so sit back, relax, and we'll get started momentarily. Back in 2016, a good friend and bandmate introduced me to the work of Andy Shauf, the singer-songwriter from Saskatchewan. His album, The Party, was a very inspiring listen and one of my favorites of the 2010s. I found the quaint atmosphere, storytelling ability, and the creativity of his work to be very compelling. And years later, we find ourselves enjoying yet another record from Mr. Shauf titled Norm. He was in town a few days ago and I got to see him and his band play the entirety of Norm from beginning to end, and it was an incredible experience despite a nearby tornado floating around outside. Please, no need to concern yourself. It's a regular occurrence in my part of the country, which was something of a surprise to Andy Shauf. But I'm really glad that that was the way that I experienced this fine set of tunes. I'm really grateful to have been present. Plus, I was able to pick up a copy of Norm while I was there. And now I get to talk about it with all of you. So let's take our vinyl record here and perhaps give it a quick spin on the turntable. Okay, taking a look at the album artwork. Kind of a scenic photograph with some typography laid over it, some handwritten, hand-drawn typography. I don't know that the image reflects the content of the album very well, unless I'm missing something, but it's nice to look at. And here we have the track listing with these symbols. This is a concept record, so there is like a story, and I guess the symbols represent the viewpoint character for that particular song. And on the inside we have the man himself, Andy Shauf, and some credits. Looks like he did more or less everything besides like the mixing and mastering and whatnot. But yeah, let's dive right in. Andy Shauf had recorded quite a bit of material in his younger years, including the album Darker Days, but gave himself something of a reboot or a rebrand of sorts in 2012 with the album The Bearer of Bad News. He developed a sound that can't be mistaken for anyone else that features woodwinds, acoustic guitars, and lush pianos set to a soft and laid-back rhythm section, not to mention his reserved vocal delivery. Like I said a minute ago, a friend introduced me to Andy Shauf's album, The Party, some years back, and there was a quaintness to it, a quality that immediately drew me in. It came across as something from an older pop music tradition that we don't appreciate as much in our current era. Think 70s folk and soft pop when they indulge in rich melodies and the instrumentation was all nestled in the analog warmth of the production. And you've got these light touches of Baroque and psychedelia added in for flavors. So if you're new to Andy Shauf, I guess you can go in expecting plenty of clarinet, some warm guitars, piano, and a small drum sound. Oh, and a bass guitar with plenty of movement. I love the way the bass parts are written on Andy's albums. So what sets Norm apart from his past releases may be a further emphasis on the inclusion of these cold, chilly, ethereal keyboard sounds resonating with abundant reverb to build the space around the rest of the instruments. And I must commend them for the way that the different instruments are written to creatively interact and work around each other. It's a small thing that we take for granted, but it's the kind of thing that gives these songs plenty of character and personality. If you're new to Andy Shauf, then you should know that one of the biggest draws of his work is that there's usually an overarching story accompanying his music. Andy has an endearing lyrical voice and a fun perspective on the mundane. Norm would certainly fall into the concept album category. So going back to The Party, that album was made up of these amusing vignettes detailing the goings-ons and relationships of various guests at a house party. His following album, Neon Skyline, allowed us to join a group of friends out on the town doing some bar hopping. But Norm has the most developed story of the three, with a beginning, middle, and end, and a chain of events that lead into each other. And I'm not going to do the usual thing for this review where we go through the album track by track. I've described the music, and I'll continue touching on that a bit. And if you're already familiar with Andy, then you sort of know what to expect on that front already. So rather, I'd like to focus on the story element of the album, kind of view it as a single holistic work with maybe an aside here and there about the music. And I'll explain the general premise first, but I'll be sure to avoid the spoilery details. The story of Norm takes a perspective of three different characters: Norm, his waifu's ex-boyfriend, and God himself. Norm comes across as something of an unmotivated everyman type who notices someone at the grocery store who sort of grabs his attention. Sure, relatable enough. A couple of songs later, and we now know enough to piece together that Norm is actually a deeply troubled stalker with a very distorted view or understanding of love. And to fill out the cast, we've got the unassuming woman that his affections are directed towards, and her tow trucker ex-boyfriend who's beginning to wonder if he wants to be an ex. And so things happen, and it eventually all comes together like an episode of Seinfeld. And all the while, God sees Norm and laments the actions that Norm is going through with, and even speaks to him in a dream, pushing and encouraging Norm to stop his wicked ways, and wondering if his love went wasted on our protagonist. But Norm is just being Norm, smoking and watching television and, occasionally leaving the house, be it to do some shopping or perhaps to keep tabs on his beloved. And so we start to recognize the classic stalker scenarios that we find Norm in, such as lingering outside the window of this lady's house, the lady he's infatuated with, or following her into a movie theater and hanging out a couple of rows back, making sure to duck whenever she turns her head. Musically, the uncomfortable nature of these scenes are well reflected in the writing. So notice how the rickety and off-kilter guitar and Paradise Cinema sounds, a little sleazy maybe, or the sense of urgency on Halloween Store. You kind of get a faster beat, the tempo just sort of picks up, and as Norm takes a quick trip to pick up an outfit at the Halloween Store. It's that kind of album, perfect for colder weather. It takes place right before Halloween. And so sometimes the music even allows us to indulge in Norm's delusion. And for example, going back to Paradise Cinema, I love how the chorus has these beautiful swells from the strings as the lyrics boldly exclaim that ready or not, the victim is Norm's number one. Or consider how dreamy and exquisite Catch Your Eye is as Norm sees the person for the first time at the grocery store. And I think Sunset may be the best example. It has a sluggish tempo and the melancholic chord progression. Unfortunately, we all kind of go through this, but when you're going through something traumatic and either in the moment or in hindsight, the events seem to be playing back in slow motion. So much anxiety and uncertainty captured in these 3 minutes, but I think I've made my point. This album is the full package. Plenty of thought went into it clearly, and I saw in the credits, he worked with the story editor for this. But even with the final product laid out before us, there is still this cryptic quality that will keep you ruminating over the lyrics for a good while. Trying to fill in the gaps. The mystery will just keep you coming back. Then there's a lot of subtext to appreciate, and even some humor on occasion, mostly to help us humanize a titular character. But don't believe for a second that you're getting a Russian novel's worth of canon and lore here. The lyrics are pretty efficient, while still being very artful, not pretentious or overdone. They get the job done, and they get the job done very well, which can be said about nearly every aspect of Norm. I didn't fully appreciate how much Andy had constructed and molded this album's mood and atmosphere until I went back and listened to The Party a few days ago and realized that that the party sounds much drier and straightforward in comparison. Listen to track 2 from Norm, Catch Your Eye, and notice how large and spacious the song feels, while the performances are gentle and laid back. Yes, from the production standpoint, I've really got no qualms. The record sounds fantastic, and Norm is very cohesive and a totally consistent journey that just kind of breezes by. The flow of the record is perfect, aided by the tracks seamlessly leading into each other, melding the music and the story together. And still, I can't seem to shake the sense that the album's missing something, perhaps towards maybe like a big focal point towards like the last half or the last third of the record. There are things that just kind of stand out more on Catch Your Eye or Halloween Store. And also the big shocking climax of the story takes place kind of towards the end of that second third, making the wind down feel somewhat drawn out, but I can't see that being a huge issue if you're mostly in this just for the music. This would be a great album even without Andy's narrative, but his gift of creating a setting and populating it with these intriguing personalities is something that one soon finds it can't really be without when listening to his work. It's a huge feature, and it sort of kept me from listening to any of these songs on their own outside of the context of the greater work. They're definitely stronger altogether, and I can say for certain that I found Norm to be somewhat impactful. I was very moved by the beautiful arrangements, complemented by a tale so disturbed and yet so poignant. And yeah, give Norm a listen, a good dedicated listen. Let the album do its thing and allow your imagination to run wild. It's a great new experience that'll stick with you for a good while. So those are more or less my thoughts on the album, but I do have some things to close out with. So let's head back to the living area for some final thoughts. Norm is an album that I've been coming back to frequently over the last month. It's such a compelling concept for starters, and musically it's just as engaging. It's one of those albums that kind of leave you emotionally stirred and pondering over the questions brought forward. Now, I know that it won't dethrone 2016's The Party. I don't know if the album can be dethroned, to be honest, but I do think it's left more of an impression on me than the Neon Skyline did. Andy and his band are honing their strengths, and it's encouraging to see the man still got tricks up his sleeves. He continues to offer fresh and exciting ideas, and it's been awesome to watch him flesh out his discography with one incredible entry after another. Norm is a strong addition and will undoubtedly hold us over until Andy's next project, whenever that should happen. So today I'll be scoring this album an 8.5 out of 10. I enthusiastically recommend it to you and consider it one of my early favorites for 2023. Please let us know if you agree or disagree. You can tell us down below in the comments. And on the way down, remember to like and subscribe if you have yet to do so. We really appreciate all of you. You've been so kind, and I really enjoy reading everyone's differing perspectives. So I guess that's about all we have for now. We'll be back very soon with more music reviews. So until then, have a great week, and we'll see you next time right here at the Vinyl Brotherhood.